Hello, and thank you so much for joining me on my first inaugural podcast. So it is exciting to be here. It's exciting to talk to you. And I want to talk about I have two of your studies here. We've got masculinity and mental illness in and after men's intimate partner relationships, and mapping men's mental health, help seeking after an intimate partner relationship breakup. And if you see, both are highlighted. They've been read and gone through, and so obviously your work has come up a lot. And I'm sure it seems that this data set, the Australian and Canadians, you're using for multiple studies. Is that true?
Yeah. So our general approach, Hunt, is that we'll do the interviews and then we'll look for to answer the primary questions that we pose at the front end. But also our analysis gets better the more time we get to spend in the data, and so we'll cut things up in different directions. So those two are two of five empirical cuts. And we'll stop there. Five is plenty, but our analysis has actually I think it's gotten better as we've gone on.
Yeah, it leads to more questions, and let's go look at that, and let's regress it for something different. And why I find all of this stuff fascinating as well. So just in general, like, what drew you to science and relationships in general?
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird one. Usually I have my own ideas, right, and just build the research around them and execute, as well as I can. But this one was different. Movember, who's a charity for men's health, contacted me and asked me to do some work in relationships, and I'm like, oh, okay, because we'd been in the suicide prevention space for men for many years, and I'm like, okay, and they sort of said, oh, we'd like to get upstream of suicide for guys by having them build better relationships. So we're sort of keen on you talking to some guys about breakups and about relationships to get an angle on us building something that would help them be better, show up better in their relationships. So it was kind of like, it was a bit of a stretch, because I just had never really thought about it. Certainly in academic terms, I had not thought about it in research terms, and so it was like amazingly interesting to me. I was like a kid in a candy shop, because just because it was new, and I don't recall talking to a lot of guys about relationships, because there's something about the sanctity of it, even for myself, like I keep things pretty in-house, right? And so it was so interesting, just massively interesting.
Oh yeah, I there's a lot going on with men these days. I just finished the book Man Out too, and it's and I just had a conversation about how to reconnect after COVID on another podcast. Just again, how our social muscles have atrophied, and just looking at the tiny little bits of data that are starting to trickle out from the last 3 years. I find fascinating as well too. But men are not in a good place, and we're sort of headed into worse area unless we can figure some stuff out, from lack of civic engagement, lack of jobs, lack of blue collar jobs, all the stuff, crushing debt, all the fun stuff out there. And especially something unique is that, at least up until 1982, men had a job that could be the provider. Didn't matter what else was going on in your life, like, as long as you could provide, you were a man. That was kind of a core of masculinity, which is a question I want to get into a little bit later as well too. But now that core does not necessarily need to be there anymore. I think men are having trouble figuring out what their role in a relationship is. Especially, at least what I see in New York City too, is a lot of my successful and powerful females, say, where are all the guys? But the average guy looks at a woman that has it all and doesn't see where he could fit in, or what needs that she has that he could help with if he's not providing. And so I coach my women on let there be a space, let him know what that is. And I also, instruct my men that you need to figure out what you want to bring to the table and what do you bring to the table. Yeah. What's your competitive advantage if you want to look at it as a buyer's and seller's market? And it also used to be that men just needed to show up and be a provider. That's it. It was a baseline. But it's it. It didn't matter what their personality was, things like that. And now women are asking for more. And that more is just normalcy. Like, breathe, respect, things like that. And men are getting pissed at that, the incels and stuff like that, the red pills are getting pissed that they have to actually do something, like show up in the relationship right now too. So it's just fascinating watching all of these factors at work.
Yeah, just to say, Hannah, I totally feel you on this. We've done a follow-up study, and the results of that will be coming in the next couple of years. But we interviewed guys 19 to 44 years of age about what an equitable and sustainable intimate partner relationship is. And wow, 100-odd guys from across the world, and it's just, we're still making sense of that data. But to your point, there is, it's not, like those providers in the 80s, they were absent providers. Like, that was the model.
Yep.
And
we're the original latchkey kids.
Yeah.
Raise yourself. Be back by dinner.
And so these guys, as young as they are, deal with that forefather thing and no blueprint, no template. Because as you say, things have changed and they're trying to adapt. And so it's been fascinating to talk to young blokes about that exact thing, that, like, where's the map, where's the template, what do you see? And I don't want to give it all away, but just to say, the guys we speak to don't understand equity, but they do understand equality, and they crave equality.
There's a big difference between those two.
Yeah, there is a massive difference, and so, and I worry that we're using the wrong language, and so part of the buy-in for guys might be more palatable to talk about equality, and espouse it than get into the equity space. But anyway, it's a complicated world, and when I talk to young fellas, I'm struck by how thoughtful many men are about the whole thing. Like they're engaging a kind of a gender critique and relations piece that perhaps I don't recall having that sort of level of sophistication when I was growing up, just to say.
I joke that I'm 46, so I joke that when I was growing up, we had Maxim magazine and Spike TV, and that was about it for our resources. So we didn't. There's two things at play. There's one that men, if we want, physiologically, just aren't built as well to be communicators in relationships, in all types of relationships, and then a lack of resources. The women, they had Oprah, 17, Hallmark Channel. Not all of those are great advice, but at least there was a place to go and to search it out, so you knew that you could at least find some answers. So at least, with the advent of the internet, it has been wonderful for good, like-minded people to find each other, and then horrible for the other like-minded people to find each other. It used to be that was just old George at the end of his property yelling things that nobody paid attention to anymore. Yeah. But now you've got thousands of old Georges all together, and I'm fascinated by the incel culture. I'm fascinated, scared, because the lone wolf killings and things that happen with this. And let's see. I won't be able to cite all of them from memory, but that men are affected more so emotionally than women after an intimate partner breakup. Mm-hmm. And the new data is showing that when they are rejected, they start going right. They start wanting to take away rights from both women and immigrants that have nothing to do with the situation at hand. So there's so much going on in this, and it's not the fault of the women in any sort of a way because of the rejecting, because men don't have enough emotional control of their bodies to be able to regulate, because men don't give each other affirmations and validations, and blah, 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 blah. It keeps spinning around and around and around. And I think just at least being able to identify what and how things are going can at least help us to understand and help. I mean, this is why I like reading these things, so I can understand what's going on in the world, and to intimately help my clients as well too. Plus, there are lies, damned lies, and statistics, so I know that I can find a study to back up anything I want to say. It's not, this is right, and here's a study, this is what I want to teach or say, and here's a study to back it up.
Yep. Yeah, and that's, like the just the prolific highway of information now, which again is an artifact of the internet and accessibility to that stuff. Yeah, you're right. We can write a front end of a paper that is lauded with empirical moments that we cherry pick to make the argument that we want. And look, sometimes you need to do that, and other times it just puts out things that are debatable, and that's okay. Sometimes the conversation is important, but you can get some pretty big views going around that are pretty discordant, and some of which are unhelpful, I think, in the masculinity space.
Yeah, and
I
think
think
and you mentioned this in the help seeking after intimate partner relationship, is that, and with all this whole data set, is that they responded to you. And those are obviously people that do reach out because they reached out to you, or they're online, or things like that. And I know it's hard to not self-select, especially, the college students are a baseline of almost all psychology, which is interesting in and of itself. So, I know that like you said too, it's like we only know what we know, but at least it can start helping us understand what's going out there. Would I kind of summed up a little bit, but what would you say is going on with men right now?
In the context of relationships, or more generally?
I'd just say generally, because it manifests itself.
I'd just say that I'd say that Kimmel called it probably a decade ago that the milestones are later. For men of
if at all.
If at all, right, of the current generation. So, and the current couple last generations, right? So then it makes it harder, more challenging for vision. And so how do you envision it's going to look, or where am I headed? Do I have a plan? And I would say that extends to relationships. I often make the point that relationships happen to men. It's like bystander stuff. It's like you went into the relationship, what were you hoping to achieve? Like what was your end game? Oh, I just liked it. That was it. Which is fair enough. Like, it's a good start, but it's like, most things we plan, career, day to day, appointment to appointment, whatever, and this just looked like a blind spot. So anyhow, all that to say, I think there's a lot of challenges for fellas these days, and as you mentioned, this coming out of the COVID stuff, if we are indeed coming out of it, just to say,
heavily knocking on wood.
Just to say, we've known for a very long time that when there's economic hardship, when there's transition after transition that you have no control over, it's a recipe for real mental health challenges for everybody. But we know, especially for blokes, they tend to have a lot of trouble in and around those issues because they converge. And it's like the collateral damage is really tough to contain. So there is a lot of challenges out there. And if you're trying to launch at this point in history as a young man, there's a lot of adaptation that's got to get done, and you've got to be able to roll with multiple, challenges. I would say, so
there's no one cause or one source for all of this.
No.
I do think, and I'm not sure where I saw someone list this, that I think to sum it all up, or to boil it all down, I think that men have lost their sense of purpose. And I think that comes in with money and just working these mick jobs, or You know, there's a lot of dudes that would love to be gardeners or janitors, but can't afford it, or can't go get a girl by having that, you know, and so they're forced to be in a job that they hate to make enough money to try to date, which is, you know, and you know, I think also even people like I'm a carpenter. I like, you know, this is my drop down table. I built all the shelves and stuff in the back because I like to physically work with my hands. And when I look at something that I've built, it fills me with pride and confidence because I have the power to influence my environment. And so it's a visual and visceral reminder of that I have control over my immediate area. And I think sometimes that if you're just a short seller at a hedge fund, what do you do? You know, and it's you might get out of your day and like, I didn't achieve anything, and so, or it's harder at least to feel it. But when you can, like, you know, step back from a hard day's worth of work and visually see something, I think that affects you, and I think it affects your sense of purpose as well too. So what I teach some of my men, if you're in a job that doesn't fulfill you in a way, you need to find something else that can do that in some other way. But again, guys aren't used to. I saw in one of your comments that, you know, men seem to have a higher pain threshold before they go and ask for help.
Right.
And yeah, because it's usually like until it gets really bad, and then like we go to the doctors too. It's like, oh, my arm's falling off. I guess I should probably go to the doctor now.
Yeah.
Well, here's how can men help and support each other? Because I think that that's a lot of the issue.
You know, I think it is about permission and it is about affirmation. So this is not easy work. So I think we simplify this a bit and we say, oh, look, just reach out to a mate or shoot the breeze. It'll be all right, and he'll be able to work with you, and everything will be all right. It's hard work. It's actually hard work, and it's skilled work. So we need to be able to ask open-ended questions. We need to be able to sit with what's said. We need to be able to stand back and not try and solve someone's problems, but just bear witness. To work through, to encourage them to think about the things that have worked in the past, some things that could potentially be helpful, you know, some sharing. And oftentimes when guys disclose, there'll be a really lovely connection. The other bloke will wander off. The guy who's disclosed will wander off. And the imperative is to follow up. Because if you do not, there is just all this embarrassment. There's this, oh, did I say too much? I don't self-disclose and I just poured my heart out. I can't be doing that. And he stood off me. I'm not hearing from him. So it's quite complex, and guys have got to, who are interested in being there for their mates, because most of us are, it's really important that we follow some rules, right?
Yeah, that's this self-disclosing and liking. People like it for the most part when you talk to them.
They do. They love it. It's an elixir. And I think when we interview guys as well, just to the studies that you've got there, you know, when we interviewed them on Zoom, because of the lockdown, they were lonely. Like, right? And they would just talked and talked and talked, often about something they'd never talked to anybody about. Mm-hmm. And we loved it. It's great. It's just really lovely to be able to have those chats. But
it's also a little sad,
elixir.
Just knowing that a researcher in a professional setting is the most friendship conversation that they've had in X amount of time. Yeah. You know? Yeah. But it
underscores what you say. They want to talk.
Yeah.
They just want to talk.
So I didn't have, or I was noticing that I didn't have as many guy friends as I used to, as we get older, and it's kind of hard to just go out and meet dudes. So I did a little bit of asking around. I have kids, and so I started a dad's group because there just aren't any, you know. And so we meet at a beer garden. We bring our kids, and we have fun. And the last time, I think there was like 12 dads and 15 kids running around, and it was a lot of fun. But I had one guy come up to me and say, "I haven't had this much fun since college. I didn't know we could do this."
Yeah.
You know, and it made me both happy and sad. Again, I'm happy that I can give this to you, but I've never met you before in my life. I'm a stranger, and you're just showing up for 2 hours, and this is the most fun you've had since college.
Yeah.
you know. And I hear from all of my wife's friends, you know, they talk about their husbands. It's like, yeah, they say they want to meet guys, but they don't know how to do it, and you know, and that's why I wrote that latest article on how to reconnect after COVID as well too, because it's the same skills. Dating and friendship and sales are all the same skill set. It's just a matter of what you want for the outcome. And I've taken it upon myself to eat the embarrassment, because it's not really. It's you know, as you know, we create our own reality in our heads. And so if a guy goes up and talks to someone and it doesn't go the way they wanted to, what do they say? I got rejected. I failed. Two really hard words, and it's not the case in either way. But if I set up a dad's group and nobody comes that day, it is not about me. It is not a reflection of who I am as a person, and I can not let that affect me. It was helpful to be an actor and hear no many times. To understand that they're not rejecting me, just not right for the part, you know. And I think I just call them non-starters for my guys. Like, it's not that you didn't get rejected; it's just a non-starter. In order to reject something, you have to know it, compare it against something else you know, look at the pros and cons, choose one, reject the other. So you didn't get rejected, and then with a failure, I said, like, did you learn something? Yes. Then you didn't fail. Yeah. But this is the reality that we tell ourselves too, and so you know, we tell ourselves, no one wants to hear from me. I don't know where that recent study is, but basically that everyone wants you to reach out more than people underestimate the value of reaching out to others.
So true, isn't it? Yeah, because if you hook up and you just have a chat and it's a bit of fun, if it's for an hour, if it's for a couple of hours, whatever, you know, and you make the time for it, you get the benefits. You honestly get the benefits, and you feel it, right? And I'd even say of your dad's group, I often reassure folks who are strong enough and courageous enough to bring a group together that if someone shows up once and never comes back again, you might have fixed them. Like that might have been the dose response they needed, and it might not be they didn't enjoy the group. It might be, hey, I loved that, I'm out, but I loved it.
I got what I needed, and now I can use this to continue on. I have a couple, like I just had a guy that excuse me, contacted me, newly separated with a 7-month-old. You know, and it's like, dude, I'm here for you. Like, and so I do say the things too, because I'm an oversharer. My therapist tells me that I have boundary issues and that I have none. But when you're an oversharer, it gives people, it feels like they can open up because you are already opening up. And if you're the one that takes the embarrassment, like, I think why dad jokes are so important is because the kids around it go, oh my God, no one's going to say anything more embarrassing than my dad just did. So then it allows them to have a little bit more conversation because your dad just ate that embarrassment. And so I'm okay with putting myself in the forefront of this because, as every guy said to me, I wish I could do this, I just didn't know how to do it.
And your point to humour is a great one, because I'm not a big fan of the teasing that we do with each other, you know, with guys, but the humour, when it's not at anyone's expense and it's just like, I'm not taking myself too seriously, it's such a great leveler of the hierarchies that typically exist within a group of guys. Mm-hmm. So it just flattens the curve, right? And I think it's a great way of just, you know, that we're not taking ourselves too seriously. It's fun. I'm enjoying this. It's meant to be fun. Yep. You know,
that's it. And we're not going to sit and talk about anything.
Right. No,
we're just going to be here, and we'll tell poop stories, and that's what we need as a guy. Just someone to, like, also because I don't know if you have children, but like once you have children, like no one wants to hear about your children as much as you want to talk about your children. Right. So being around other people, like now we get to tell people about our kids. So I have been forming new relationships in this and meeting guys that I like, and I'm happy that I am able to, you know, that's what I say, the easiest and truest definition of power is the ability to influence your environment. That's it. And I am happy that I have learned and understand that all of us have such abilities to influence our environments. It's like potential energy versus kinetic energy. It's all in us all the time. Just don't really know how to manifest it sometimes. Or again, your fear of loss or fear of face or fear of failure, of all those things that, you know, get cycled up in your head as well too. Yeah, it can, and then not knowing how to have an outlet. You know, I saw that in the one of the studies, the yellow one, people went back to therapy, but most went back to therapy as opposed to found therapy for the first time. How can you make it easier for men to access mental health for the first time?
Yeah, right. Conversations like this are helpful because we norm it in a way that I think that, the breakup traumas these guys went through were amongst the biggest challenges in their lives. And so it would make sense that if you wanted some impartial help, because friends and family can be great, but if they start dissing on the ex-partner, that's really hard.
Because they're here to support you,
right?
Not necessarily to help.
Yeah. And so, these guys who did reach out and got, some strategies. And I think, look, one of the main ones that I keep hearing from guys is to get it inward. Like, so it's very easy to blame. It's very easy to feel cheated, irrespective of the circumstances of the breakup. But when they get to the introspection about what they might do better, show up better, that's the deal. And sometimes you need a bit of a reminder or a bit of a strategy or some tricks to doing that, to just flipping your mind. And that's like a coach. I would, if I was wanting to play quarterback, I'd get it worked out, right? I'd go and see someone who knew what they were talking about.
This is something that I find, obviously I'm in the industry, so I'm within it, but it's something that just blows my mind. You said something about this at the beginning too, is like if you want to get a job, you do certain sets of things to get yourself a job. If you want to lose weight, you cut your calories, you start exercising more, you eat healthier food. But what do we tell people when they're looking for relationships? Don't worry, it'll just happen.
Yeah.
Now, if I wanted to learn German, and you said to me, don't worry, it'll just happen, how inane that sounds.
Right.
But this is the advice we give to other people. It is not, and I have a generation of women who believe that someday my prince will come, and a perfect 10, not a 9.5, will come sweep her off her feet without any work on her behalf, even though she's 45 and not in the same dating pool that she used to be in.
Yeah.
And then I have a whole bunch of men who think running towards a plane, skirting security to declare their love, or showing up on people's doorsteps with placards saying you should marry me, are the way to win women's hearts, because this is what we've been shown. I actually have been pitching a TV show around updating Hitch, making her a female Indian immigrant New York City dating coach. Because dating hasn't really been updated, and for me, what I get pissed about in the dating shows, trash is fine. Trash is fine. Everybody likes their trash TV. But there's nothing that gives anybody any takeaways for dating. If I watch Top Chef, I know that real isn't real. Like, the producers are picking the winners, or they're taking edits from the first and the 10th things and mashing them together. That's fine. But I still get some takeaways. Like, oh, cool, I never would have thought to put pink Himalayan salt with smelt. I have something in my head now. I took something away from that. And there's nothing on the landscape right now at all for men or women that can entertain and educate at the same time.
It's so interesting because, we romanticize love, and it was all in the movies, and now reality TV is an extension of that, I think that differentiation between fiction and non-fiction is actually bigger. You knew it was a movie, but this stuff is like, if I go on this show, everything could be fixed, right? This person went on. We got pseudo celebrities in Vancouver as a byproduct of being on those shows. It's like, life changing, right? And it's weird. And it does sell. It sells a certain dream, and it's just, relationships are work. They're hard work, and they're consistent work. They're not really built for the cameras and the happy endings. I don't want to doom and gloom it, but just to say, they're work.
Oh yeah. To quote the great poet Taylor Swift, it's going to last forever, or it's going to crash and burn. Like, there's only two ways for it to go. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
I think people also need to understand that, like, failing or whatever, like Edison said, I didn't fail I just found 254 ways of not doing it, you know. But I don't think people get that it's part of the process. And so one of the things that I coach on is trying to, like, we've all worked out, but working out is painful. So usually the human body moves away from pain, but why do we move towards this pain? Because we've linked it to the future pleasure of how we're going to look, how we're going to feel, how we're going to be perceived, whatever our own carrot is. Now, if we can find a way to link this current uncomfortableness of dating, current pain, to a future pleasure of being in a relationship, being an interesting person, you know, being someone that someone else desires, then it's part of the process, and it makes that pain much easier to deal with because you understand that it's a process getting you somewhere.
Yeah.
And again, that pain isn't real. We manufacture it, but that doesn't mean that it isn't hard. And like what you said too is, like, we have to create new synapses. We have to create new brain pathways, and that is hard. We have to literally retrain the brain. One of the worksheets I give to my clients is the countering negative thoughts. And, you know, it's like, okay, every negative thought you have, you got to write a positive thought of that. Like, he's looking at me because he thinks I'm ugly. He's looking at me because he thinks I'm pretty. Yeah. I think somebody told me one time, but everything in life has a pro and a con list. You just get to choose which side you want to look at. Yeah. And so a lot of my coaching is just mindset. I mean, most of this is mental anyways, and how to just be a better human being, how to be more in touch with yourself, how to know what you want, how to understand the machinations of society. Because my first session with all my clients said, okay, this is going to take a while because dating is a mix of biology, sociology, psychology, and anthropology. By definition, so is kind of everything we do because they're the four tenets of humanity. But I mention that because to understand our own motivations, the motivations of the person sitting across from you, the motivations of society at large, we have to focus on different aspects of these to understand what's going on so that we can control for it better. Like, as an example I give to my clients, I said, if you look across the room and you see someone, oh, that person looks cool, I'm going to go talk to them. Well, your brain just did 100 calculations. Where are they? Who are they talking to? What's their body language? What are they wearing? What are they eating? What are they drinking? You know, whose house is it? Without you even realizing that happened. So if you can kind of slow that down a little bit so you can kind of understand what's going on in our minds in general, it can be so much more helpful to understand. Things start to make a little bit more sense. I feel like it's kind of like looking behind the curtain in The Wizard of Oz. It's like, oh, really? That's it? Like, yeah, that's it. It's not. It is work, but it's. I guess I would say it is a language that if you don't know it, it seems ridiculously complex and like seeing letters in your numbers for the first time. Yeah. But once you can start to understand it, just like understanding just human nature, it's like, oh, this. So all I have to do is walk up and say hello. Yeah, that's it. That's it. To prove a point, one time, one of my clients, I take them out on-site coaching sometimes too, so I can, you know, adjust. Like, let's go try and talk to this. Let's go try and talk to that. I don't take them to like meet girls or meet women. Take them to like networking events so we can practice talking to everybody. But one guy just thought you had to have the perfect line, and I was like, okay, give me any sentence in the English language, anything you want, and I'm going to use that sentence for the next approach that I walk up to and it wasn't that creative, luckily, because he could have had fun with me. It said something like, I don't know, it was like, those oranges look awesome. You know, we're in New York City, so that sounds weird. So, okay, walk right up to these girls. I'm like, those oranges look awesome. They're like, what? I'm like, I think that'd be the name of my boat if I ever got one. What about you? What would you name your boat? Oh, I think it, and then he's like, what just happened there? I'm like, see? Yeah. Like, people just, and I think that's another thing too, is that I think sometimes the men and the women are trying to reach an ideal that the other side doesn't necessarily want. Right. You know, you see the guys trying to get huge and swole in the gym. It's not necessarily what the ladies are looking for. You see the ladies trying to lose all their weight and get, you know, flaquita, and that's not necessarily what all the guys want too. So, I mean, that's why I'm fascinated by this world. It's human nature is a microcosm. Yeah. So let me I want to ask a few more questions too. Why do you think relationship endings seem to affect men more? Is it because of the lack of resources or the lack of knowing how to deal with one's own emotions?
Yeah, all of that. You know, I think there's a bevy of emotions that go with it, and I think my sense of those emotions that they're often discordant. So the idea that you might be relieved and regretful at the same time, for example.
Cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, right. So then you're like, oh, I'm going to have to sit with that to make sense of it. And of course, the go-to is to, go out with your mates and get on the booze and wash it away, and because it's not making sense, and you're looking for a rational moment in something that's highly it's not ready to be deconstructed. You just got to sit with it, and so trying to get guys to just kind of think through that is one of the things that's really, really helpful, and the timing of that has to be right. So I think that troubles guys. I think the notion that the rejection or the failure or both, that something just didn't work out, I think cuts to the quick on a lot of guys. That idea of wanting to belong. It is a paired society. Like, we do value that, and so if you're kind of by your lonesome, you look lonely, and you probably are feeling lonely in the aftermath of this, where you might close off. And I think there's that feeling, when something ends, that you don't want to trouble other people. You don't want to belabor the ins and outs of it and whine about it. You kind of want to move on, but that's going to take a little bit of time. So I think guys, are usually in a hurry to be okay, to be back where they were, to be better than they were and stuff. And that again, the relationship, especially if it was distressed, the hangover of that, plus the aftermath of the breakup, and if it's something involving third parties with kids and alimony and the rest of it, it's like, this is really complex work that's just converging on guys. And so I do think they do it tough, because they tend to isolate as an initial way, either to make sense or just dull it down. And really, the opposite is true. It needs to be some time to yourself, but there also needs to be that reaching out to kind of to work through this.
I tell them, I describe it as a death. It is the death of a relationship. It is the death of a possible future. Mm-hmm. It is the death of a possible you. You will be a different person after this. Yeah. And so I think if you can look at it as a death, you can understand the grieving process a little bit more, to understand how you get through that, or where you are along the process.
Yeah, and just mapping it, and just strategy, just strategy in the short term for how am I just gonna feel a little bit better? How am I gonna buoy myself a little bit? And it might be the simple things that you forgot to do in the relationship, and
it's always the simple things. It's always the simple things. It's always the little things. There was so I'm actually talking with another couple of scientists about working on our own study to look and see if there's a causal link between job hopping and relationship hopping.
Okay.
And see if it coincides directly, or it's just something that's happened alongside each other. But then we're thinking about adding Zillow to that as well, the sort of gamification of these milestones.
Yeah. And
do they all affect each other? And does one influence the other? So I'm excited to see where that goes. For me, the biggest thing that if I could have my name on a study someday, oh my gosh, that's like my little rock star moment. So that's exciting for me. Well, I want to, as much as I could sit and talk for 2 weeks solid on all of this stuff, and I would love to have you back and talk more about some of your other studies too, which you need to send me so I can read them.
Absolutely.
Is there anything that you see that you would like, advice for men that you see out there, or things, words of wisdom from the inside?
Just that, I guess the main thing is that you're not alone in it, right? You're not alone in a distressed relationship. You're not alone in a disrupted relationship. You're not alone in relationships that are going really, really well. There's folks out there that are going through a lot of stuff. I just would say that the privacy of people's intimate partner relationships doesn't always allow us to know what's going on for other people, and also stops us from speaking to what might be considered almost the other life, you know, because there's the work life, there's the recreational life, and then there's this other piece that's a core value for you, you know, in relationships. So just to say, I think, you know, as simple as it is, if there's an anecdote or a remedy to this, it is to ask people what's going on for them, especially guys, you know, like I had a mate I hadn't caught up with for ages, and I was worried, but I didn't know how to break the ice or re-break the ice, and, you know, I was really pleased that we were able to get together and catch up. And there was nothing going on, but I asked directly. I said, I've been really worried about you, you know, and it was some other stuff. It was work stuff that kept him busy. But it's just to say, you know, I think we got to be a bit braver in our approaches, you know, to
and
to help
it's something that you mentioned in here too, and that we know very well as well. Ladies, if a man opens up to you, allow him to, because if you laugh or consider it unmanly or ever use that information against him in any sort of a way, you will shut down forever. And I know that's a hard dichotomy too, because you have the women said, I don't need a man that's in touch with his emotions, but if he cries at a horse commercial, I don't find that manly, you know. And again, we're trying to define the word masculine, you know. What is masculine, what is manly? I think I have back here, first find the man inside you before you can inspire manliness in others.
Right.
And I think I like it because of how complex that statement is.
Yeah.
Find the man in you. Who is the man in you? What type of man are you? And then, what type of man? What is manliness? You know, to all of us. And I think one of the things that's hard for guys too is, especially in sports-based societies, you see them, or in high school, as like the apex, and if you're a nerdy, untalented guy, this masculinity is kept away from you. You are not allowed to participate in this type of masculinity. So what type of masculinity is available to? And, you know, there's fedoras and katanas and all these, you know, Cary Grant to samurais, all these different. We're trying on these different types of masculinity, I think, trying to figure out how to be a man, what is, you know, in this society. So, you know, that's a large question that I'm sure we'll figure out exactly the next time we talk.
Yeah. But just to say, that plurality of masculinities is so important to keep in mind, and I love that your reference to it's me, then we. You've got to know who you are and what you value to be any good and show up, and so again, it's just working it through those things. But that plurality of how we can be as men, I think, is just key to try and relax guys a little bit. That you know, it's your script. You know, it hasn't been written yet. You know, like it's your deal. You work it out. You know.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. Keep doing the good work you are doing. I'm looking forward to in a macabre sort of way to see all the data that comes out of the last 3 years. But it will be fascinating if nothing else. So again, thank you so much for coming, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Cheers, man.